This is the Conrad Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K. How can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
For 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Odyssey, and Rumble. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is November the 9th, 2023, and this is episode 396 of Workshop Radio. How in the world is everyone? Wondering, something I haven't mentioned this week because it's been all just incredible interviews. Did the time change kick your butt? This is the easy one, but it exists and it's there. And so I thought, hey, let's open up tonight's show with a rendition or an edition of I Shit You Not. Kind of the everyday explanation for common sayings, common things around things we deal with on a regular basis. I thought, hey, let's talk about the stupid old daylight savings time, because to me, I love, you always have this idea of where it came from. And anyway, so it goes way back to Benjamin Franklin. And they said he's the most often credited as the first person to suggest daylight savings time, or a variation of it in the 18th century. He was in Paris enjoying his mornings he said, but he realized he was wasting his Parisian mornings by staying in bed. He proposed that the French fire cannons at sunrise to wake people up to reduce candle consumption at night. That doesn't sound familiar. And this whole kind of write-up came from a summary of a New York Times article, so don't hold it against me, but they're kind of interested. So for most of the 1800s, time was set according to the sun, and so different cities could have different times. They said here you could have New York at 12:05, Philadelphia at 12:15, and it was absolutely hell on earth for getting the trains and that sort of thing to run the way they were. In the 1840s, British railroads decided, hey, we need to standardize all of this because, standardization. And then in North America, it was until 1883 before things got standardized, and they made 4 time zones, the ones that we're always fighting against here, trying to figure out, is it mountain time? Is it central time? Is it eastern time? But they decided, hey, let's do this to streamline train service, which I thought was pretty cool. And then going along a little bit further, and that was here's another thing. How would we ever have our time zones if it wasn't for the government? Well, check this out. A coalition of businessmen and scientists decided on the time zones in 1883. It wasn't until 1918 that the government took it over. Imagine that. So what did we have there? 25 years of time zones that existed without the government. I don't understand how it's possible. Anyway, 1883, the United States took it over in 1918, and guess what they brought in immediately? Daylight savings time. Nobody really knows why, but at least it's kind of lost to time a little bit. And that's when us North Americans, or Americans at the time, lost their first hour of sleep. And then going a little bit further along in 1966, which I thought was kind of cool, they introduced the Uniform Time Act, and that's when they decided that 2 a.m. would be the time that you switch clocks forward and back. And as a kid, I was always intrigued by why it was 2 a.m., but I think it's a pretty simple explanation. That way you don't accidentally go back to the day before, because if you turned them back at 1 o'clock, you went back to midnight. Anyway, it would just screw everybody up. So this one's pretty funny, though. When they brought in the time zones, daylight savings time, the shift was not universally well received. I had to laugh at this. Evangelical Christians were actually some of the biggest opponents of bringing in the daylight savings time. And the reasoning was that time came from God and the railroads weren't supposed to mess with it. That was rather interesting. And growing up, I was always told the reason we have daylight savings time is, well, so your evenings can be better in the summer, but mainly to save energy. That was the entire idea. Well, that might not be the case. Do a little bit of digging, and you can find just as many studies that say daylight savings time has no effect or a negative effect on energy usage, just as often as you can find studies that say, guess what? It works as well. So in the exact same year, 2008, when they brought out when they extended daylight savings time a little bit more, there was a study that said 0.5% of total electricity use went down when they implemented this. And there was another study the same year that said 1% of electricity went up. Leave it to the government. I'm personally in favor of just doing away with it. I think it's stupid. I think a long time ago it should have been done away with. So here's where we stand with it right now. If you guys are as fed up with daylight savings time and standard time as I am, 19 states in the U.S. and a bunch of provinces in Canada have passed laws that say they're going to stick with daylight savings time going forward year round. However, the problem is that all of them, it's like a good old-fashioned Mexican standoff, because basically all of the laws that have been enacted say we will change to daylight savings time when all of our geographical neighbors change as well. So the problem is that everybody's waiting for someone else to do it. And what's going to happen is it's going to be like Jenga, you pull one and everything falls, or a deck or a house of cards or whatever. But once one state finally does it, it's going to change continent wide. It's just a matter of fact. And apparently there was even an article or, a bill that was passed in the Senate, but didn't make it through whatever the other American set of legislation is. And they're trying to bring it in again. So I don't know about you guys. Anybody listening on the audio, you can definitely throw it up there. But are you guys tired of the time change? I know we're a week in now, but yeah, I've had enough of it. I'd rather not. Evening Digger, I see you out there. So anyway, I thought that'd be a fun little look at why in the hell, and we really don't know why. Everybody says, well, it was because of time change, or to save time, or to save energy. But you can go back to Benjamin Franklin and wanting to get people up earlier in the morning in Paris in the 18th century. So there you go. All right. 3 quick announcements. Number 1, remember, live streams. Looks this way. Live streams are going to be an hour earlier going forward from here on out, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. We did a poll in the Telegram group, and you guys spoke. Overwhelming majority said, yes, we'd love to go an hour earlier so we can end an hour earlier, get the East Coast people in a little bit earlier. We'll see. We're going to do it for a month or 2. And if it's an overwhelming success, we will keep it up. But for right now, it's a permanent change. Number 2, if you are in the YouTube live stream this evening, I pinned the Telegram group link. But here's the deal. We've almost hit 250 crazy delinquents over in the Telegram group. But more than that, it's not so much about numbers as it is about getting people in there so they can be inspired to get shit done. That's the place where all the crazy delinquents hang out. It's where we give each other a kick to the behind. It's where we motivate one another. It's where we share our successes and our failures, where we ask questions. And honestly, it's just a place for the workshop community to hang out. And so if you haven't joined Telegram before, I tell you, I know, I get it. You don't need another social media platform. This is different. I like it. It's one single central location where you can kind of find out all things workshop and all things delinquent. So give it a shot. If you hate it, delete it. But seems like everybody who joins really enjoys it. It's a motivating for the good and a motivating for the kick to the ass kind of community. And I love it. And number 3, Thursday night. You know what that means? It is, we got to remember our sponsor, my good brother, Joel Riles from Fortress K9, or from the Protection Dog podcast. Once again, if you're looking for someone else or something else to fill those old ear holes of yours, give him a go. Add him, give him a follow in your podcast feed. Go over and like his YouTube channel, his TikTok, his Instagram, because he has great content across the board. And you might think, but I don't have any dogs. You don't need dogs. It's really, I would be surprised if something called Fortress K9 and the Protection Dog podcast had nothing to do with dogs. Yeah, there's lots on there, but there's a ton of stuff that Joel shares from his own life about how he finds motivation, how he found the motivation to get up and rebuild his life after everything kind of fell apart. So give Joel some love, give him a follow, give him a subscribe, whatever platform you find him on, share the love, guys. So there we are. All right, so let's slide in. Tonight, we're going to talk about, in a minute, I have one article. We haven't done one of these in a while, and I was kind of excited to do one. Stranger Than Fiction. And it's really just where we take a look at the news. I give you my thoughts on things that are pertinent to prepping and our overall kind of look at life. And this one really caught my eye. And there's some stuff in it that I love, and there's some stuff in it that I don't agree with at all. And I'm sure there's some stuff that I'd love to hear Sean Mills' thoughts on this article as well. But I'm sure there'll be people out there who are like, yeah, no, this is not, I don't dig it. So anyway, this one comes from CNET, and is the home battery the new generator? I like it. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see it here. There we are. Let's bring it up. And there you go. So anyway, obviously it's a little bit bigger than a Duracell battery, but home batteries are getting bigger, more powerful, and more high tech. Are they worthwhile even without solar panels? And I like this article because this is a concept that I've been hearing for over a decade now. I think I originally heard it from Stephen Harris. And if you guys have been listening to Jack Spirko over in the Survival podcast for, going on 10 years now, then you remember a lot of Stephen Harris's stuff. But he used to talk about this, building a battery bank. He would say, build your battery bank before you get solar panels, or build one and don't even have solar panels, because you can charge it from the grid. And I really thank you. Gunfighter Concealment says he did the free thing and hit the like button. Yes, hit the thumbs up, the like button, guys. It's free and easy. And if you're out there listening, share that we're online so that we're live right now. So anyway, we've all been there. This is the CNET article. It says the lights go out, the power company sends you a text message. A tree fell on the line, weather turned severe, and you'll be out of electricity until people in hard hats can get it running again. Sure. The average American household experienced a little more than 7 hours of power outages in 2021, with a typical outage lasting 2 hours. Okay, cool. I agree with those facts. I talk about these things on a regular basis, and depending on the year, I've seen studies from 2018, 2019, 2017, and they all kind of run in that same category. Some years it's around 10 hours, some years it's around 8, but the average outage in the last few years has been running between 2 and 4 hours. Most people could get by with no power for that time. Even, I hate to say this, even in Alberta, in a deadly cold winter, we could probably get by with 2 hours. Maybe not in the minus 40 if the wind was blowing, but anything else we could get by. So there we go. All right. Makes sense. Says when that happens, you probably find yourself wishing you had a backup power source. Yeah, no shit. For years, that's typically meant a generator with, of course, they throw the word out there, fossil fuels. Anyway, more recently, it might have meant a set of solar panels on your roof and a battery in the basement or the backyard, a system that can set you back tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, I'm good with that. I wondered where they were going with that for a minute, because they just said a set of solar panels. And that kind of, to me, I'm picturing like 2 or 3 solar panels and a couple of batteries. And they made it sound like, anyway, let's keep going, because you need a big battery to charge a home. We know that, or to run a home. We know this. For somebody who's motivated to get a generator, they're also motivated to get a battery. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but here we are. Question from CNET. Can you get a battery without solar panels? Well, yeah, you can. So let's run some numbers. It says a home battery that provides something like 12,000 kilowatt hours of backup power will cost you $10,000 or more. I looked it up tonight. The average Powerwall from Tesla, the beginning one, is $14,200, right? So around $14,000. You can get a hell of a backup generator system for that. Whew. And they said another problem is they can't get real. If you want to get a full solar system, CNET was kind of pricing it in the $30,000 range. Some batteries can only be installed alongside solar panels, and it's definitely a worthwhile consideration if you're in the market to become energy independent from your utility. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you could get batteries just to put anywhere, but I guess some places are trying to sell them as a full system. Anyway, but the basic answer to the question is yes, you can get a home battery with no solar panels attached. And the battery market is getting competitive with a lot of companies, which in turn is driving the price down. That evolving market means prices are getting more affordable. Battery prices recently over the past few months are definitely coming down. I would say more than that, it's been the last few years. It's definitely been the prices have been coming down for sure. The downside to batteries without solar panels is that your battery has to be charged by something. In this case, it's being charged by energy from the grid that you pay for. Yep, I get it. And then, of course, they hype on that energy might be expensive and it might be generated at a polluting coal or gas fired. And then we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but yeah, that power is finite. It's not like, and again, your fuel storage for a generator is finite as well. You can only store so much, but you can store a hell of a lot more fuel in a compact space than you can a few batteries. Tax credit. Here we go. Tax credits, right? It used to be that you couldn't get a federal tax credit for a battery unless it came attached to solar panels. Okay. Now a battery is eligible for 30% residential clean energy credit, just like solar panels. Now, here's the deal. I would be 100% fine with doing away with all taxation in general, period, overnight. That'd be fine. I know people like, shut up, Tim, you can't do that. But anyway, if they're going to steal our tax dollars and then they're going to say, would you like a little taste back in the form of a tax rebate? Take advantage of it, take advantage of it, take advantage of it. Says that change goes a long way in making batteries more affordable. Resiliency to a typical homeowner can be achieved in a couple of ways. The conventional way people have done it for years is to just install a backup generator. Yes. But they said that has its own challenges as far as emissions, noise, and maintenance go, but also economic inequality. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, any sort of backup power system is going to suffer from problems from economic inequality, because if you don't have any money, you're not going to buy one. But the other thing they don't mention is buying a smaller generator system. $10,000 for a backup generator on your home. Yeah, for a full whole home generator. Absolutely. But you have other options. He said state level policies are encouraging growth in the battery market, nudging people toward installing them. In California, changes to solar net, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, let's skip. What batteries can do that generators can't? Well, let's see. Generators run when you need them, when the power goes out. Batteries don't just have to be there as backups. Standalone energy storage can be used more economically than a backup generator because it's not a stranded asset only used during periods when there's a power outage. In other words, you're going to use your batteries on a regular basis. I think what they're kind of getting at here is using time of day discounting for batteries and for power storage. So you'd fill the batteries up at night and then you'd sip off them during the day, in theory. Yeah, here, and they said that function's known as energy arbitrage. It helps in more than one way. It can save you money, increasing the value. Anyway, yeah. So, but the fact is that being used every single day might itself be an advantage. If the battery's functioning regularly, you'll likely notice issues during a time when you don't necessarily need it. So basically what they're saying is if you're using your batteries on a daily basis, when something goes wrong, you're going to catch it before you need it when there's a power outage. Okay. Same reason you would run your generator every 3 months to make sure it is up and running. I don't know. A whole home battery system for some people might make sense in some places. I don't see it all yet. Here's another thing they say. Batteries also tend to have a longer warranty than generators, typically 10 years or more compared to 3 to 5 for generators. Battery is cleaner, meaning you won't need to worry about fire risk, smell, noise, or fume. Well, buying a battery is, it says buying a battery is cheaper than that. You don't have to worry about maintaining a fuel connection, which sometimes require people to test and certify them every year. I mean, I guess here's the thing, and here's where the rubber meets the road. It says the problem with batteries is that if there's nothing to charge them, like solar panels, you're stuck with however much energy is in them when the lights go out. That might not be a whole lot. And this is where they make a whole lot of noise in this article to talk about a whole lot of things, but they wait until the last 1, 2, 3 paragraphs to really get to the brass tacks. And this is what happens. The problem with batteries is that if there's nothing to charge them, you're stuck with however much energy is in them. That might not be a whole lot. No shit. We know this. The average American home uses roughly 900 kilowatts of electricity per month, or 30 kilowatts per day. Here's the thing. A Tesla Powerwall, one of the most powerful home batteries out there, holds up to 13.5 kilowatts, less than half a day of normal energy usage. Yep. Okay. Well, you could sip off those batteries as well, but when it comes down to it, the biggest, one of the most expensive battery systems for an entire home is still less than a half a day's usage. So it might work for your typical outage. Anyway, but when they come right back down to it, they say a generator, meanwhile, will keep producing electricity as long as it has fuel. And that could be a lot longer than a battery will last. So for extended outages, a battery without solar panels will be used up once it's drained, but a generator will keep on chugging. And this is the problem that we end up running into. Yes, Gunfighter says, the only thing I like about the whole battery system is it's quiet and it draws no attention. So maybe one day I'll invest in one. And here's the thing. I'm not anti-battery. I'm not anti-electric vehicle. If you've listened to some of the shows I've done on here or with other people talking about electric vehicles, I'm definitely more pro battery and electric vehicle than most people in the prepper sphere. But I think we've hit a bit of a, not a critical mass, but we've kind of hit the early adoption period, and things need to improve a hell of a lot before I'm going to put my entire backup energy plan into the hands of batteries. And here's the other thing, battery power is great for 90% of the time, 99% of the time, but it's like an electric vehicle. If you're going to do a cross-country road trip right now, electric vehicles still aren't that feasible. So if I had to choose between a whole home generator and a battery by itself, I think I don't know. I'd go back and forth. I do like the idea of having the battery system hooked up at home, able to be used at any time, but I think I'm still going with a whole home generator for now, guys. There are benefits and drawbacks to both. And the thing is, and this is what I guess pisses me off more than anything, is battery where it stands right now is not necessarily the answer. It might be in a few more years. And I know we have to go through a rough patch in order to come out the other side with new technology. But when it comes down to it, I just don't, we're just not there yet. And to have it forced down your throat on a regular basis is frustrating. But you guys know, again, I mean, look, for the last 3 or 4 years that I had my landscaping business or the handyman business, it was 100% battery powered, well, except when it wasn't. If I had a really big field that I had to weed whip, well, there's no way I'm going with battery. And that's still the case. I bought myself a nice battery backpack blower recently, and it's great. Chris Dixon says, damn your time change. I know, Dixon. So yeah, anyway, I love the backpack blower. But again, it would not have worked for a full-time business. So my thoughts on battery, simple as that. I love the technology. There's so many good aspects to it, but it's not perfect. And it has a hell of a long way to go before I'm going to be willing or able to invest my family's entire emergency preparedness energy budget into it. So let's leave it at that. That's enough with this article this evening. We'll get somebody on that we can chat about this on a regular basis or on a deeper scale. I'd like to get Sean back on. We need to chat about this a little bit. So how's everybody been this week? It's been a hell of a week. It's been a good week. I just came back from Montana. I made a whirlwind round trip. Went down last night. I've had interviews all over the place. I did the Tinker Tribe interview 2 nights ago from my car, from my truck. I did the interview in a hotel room with Jessica Kraft yesterday, late afternoon, early evening. And now I'm home, back down in the workshop dungeon, getting to chat with you guys again, which I love. And it's great. So yeah. All right. And everybody came to hear about the handyman business, the entrepreneurial end of things. And so I wanted to, I don't know, it's been a couple of months since I finalized the sale of All Seasons Maintenance. And I'll bet you it's just kind of fun. What reminded me to do this episode, or one of the thoughts of it, was the other day I went to get the mail, and there was a great big, I opened something up and there was a great big check in there for me. And I looked, I was like, oh, nope, that's not for me. That's for All Seasons Maintenance. So a few of my old customers hadn't updated their mailing addresses yet. And it was, So anyway, I've had a couple of those come through, a couple of bills come through with All Seasons Maintenance. It's just a matter of tying up all the bows. But I figured it was a good time, since I've been working on tying up the last of the loose ends from the sale of the business, was to go back 7 years and to share my thoughts and maybe some lessons. You guys got questions along the way, go ahead. I tried my damnedest to pull a few stories out of this old brain that maybe you haven't heard before from the early days of All Seasons Maintenance. I know, and I'm sure there'll be some in here that you've heard before, but it was a journey. And yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit, guys. But I wanted to start with the shitty stuff that I did, some of the worst mistakes, or some of the early mistakes, just some of the worst memories. And this was probably just to scare a few people off to start with. But I don't know if I've ever told you guys this. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. But, I always said that once I got into the business, I really wanted to make somewhere around $100 an hour. To me, and that sounds insane, but I've talked about it and it's really not. But that first year that I started the business, before I went back to the hardware store, back to the farm supply store, I'm almost ashamed to admit I was charging $15 an hour. 15, guys, $15 an hour. That's not even worth showing up for. And I had a customer who had a mobile home in Macklin, and I would go in there and they had a bathroom renovation they wanted. They had a rotten floor. They had just little things. I would just show up and they'd have a burnout light that wasn't just a light bulb. The entire thing had to be replaced, or a plug that was on the wall. Just little things. And I would drive, it would be a round trip of, well, it's say 15, 20 minutes each way to get to their house. 40 minutes. I'd go out for 2 hours to work. I'd make $30, basically pay for the gas and nothing else. And you wonder why I had to go back to work at the hardware store, at the farm supply store. It's because I wasn't charging enough. So remember that when you start and you think, I don't want to charge a lot because I'm new. I don't want to charge a lot because I don't want to be scared to be turned down. When it comes down to it, you're worth more than you think you are. And we'll talk more about that, but holy shit, I didn't charge nearly $15 an hour, guys. Minimum wage, $15 an hour. So anyway, this was another one. I don't think I've ever shared this one on the podcast before, but when I got laid off from the oil patch, I was a solid year without work. And that's when I started my business. And it wasn't for lack of trying as much as it was for really wanting to make anything work, but going back to the shit I had done before. And I remember one day my daughter come home, Olivia, and she didn't mean anything by it at all. No, I mean, I love her to death, but she said her boss had asked her why her dad wasn't working, why he was basically hanging around the house all the time. And I wasn't, but she didn't know that. And that hurt my ego so bad that I went into the bathroom and I bawled my eyes out. I can count on one hand how many times I've cried in the last decade. And that was one of them, because I was trying. I wanted this business to work, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And I wasn't there yet. And it was miserable. I remember, and why that stupid old lady meant anything to me at that time, I don't know, but it sucked. And I remember it. And I was talking to Becky about it afterwards, and you're going to have some rough goes, guys. And I remember, anyway, that is before what I call, so on the side of the truck, it says Toolman Tim's Property Management, established 2017. These couple of memories I'm telling you now were actually from before that. I went with the day that I started back at the hardware stores when I really launched the business. So I was trying to make it go then, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And then I remember I went around town and I put up a whole bunch of posters. They said all seasons maintenance and the shit that I would do and that kind of thing. And this was just after I went full time, after I walked away from the hardware store. I keep calling it hardware store because you guys know it as that, but it was really the farm store. And somebody, and I doubt it was even anybody who knew who I was, but they wrote half-assed job or half-assed work or something on my poster. And dude, if that didn't jump up and kick me in the nuts and make me feel like a bag of shit at that time. So you're going to have stupid things, because when you're first starting a business, unless you have all the confidence in the absolute world, you're going to be insecure. You're going to feel like you're made out of glass or crystal at the time, but it's okay. That kind of shit happens. It's not the end of the world. You'll have somebody complain about the work you did. You'll have somebody mad because you screwed up your schedule, whatever it happens to be. When you first get started, bad shit's going to happen, and it's okay. And it's going to feel like the end of the world. I told you about my terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Well, that was actually yesterday, 3 years ago yesterday. I had the memory on Facebook. You're going to have those, but it's okay. I promise it is. And especially okay. Just take a minute, breathe, and move on. How about, I've told you this one before. I got into the vent pipe. A guy said, hey, can you renovate my bathroom? And I didn't really think I could. So I give him a price that would have been worth it, I suppose. I thought I give him the highest price I could think of, and it was $500, which, looking back on that now, it should have been 10 times that amount of money. But he took me up on it, and he said, yeah, go ahead and start. And I remember It was the first time I'd ever drilled a 4.5-inch hole through the outside of a building to install a dryer vent. I learned how to do it. I fucked it up a couple of times, not completely, but it was what it was. And then I was down into that trailer, rolling around in mud, rolling around in mice and mouse shit. And I was trying to get the pipes to run the way I wanted them to. And it was an absolute clusterfuck under there. And when I finally thought I knew what I was doing and I cut into that pipe and the whole vent stack just went right down and hit the ground. Oh, that was a rough day. That was another day I was going to quit, but I didn't. And I tell you all this shit because we've had days at the daycare now where today was a shitty day. It was just a bad day for Becky. And she handles it. She's like a brick, guys. The stuff will bother her for a little while, just like it always bothered me. And we let it happen. Give yourself an hour, 2 hours to commiserate, 5 minutes, whatever you can afford to do. And then remember, the be all and end all is not whatever shitty situation you're in right at that moment when you're in business, because you'll have lots of them. You'll have lots of peak, mountain and valley moments as well. But there'll be times when you're just like, no, I'm giving up. But just don't ever give up that day. Like Val, when we had Valerie on here who hiked the Appalachian Trail and she stepped into a rattlesnake's nest or whatever, and she got trench foot, and she said, no, I'm not giving up today. I'll sleep on it and I'll see you in the morning. That's what you have to do. If you can take that mindset into business and say, anytime I want to give up, I have to sleep on it. Make that a mantra of yourself and you'll never give up. You 100% won't give up. And if you don't give up, you will find success. It might take a while. It might not be in the shape or the form that you think it's going to be, but you'll find success. Sometimes I took jobs on that I didn't even have the gear to handle at the time. Kathy's shed, the one that I love that story. We didn't want to get up on the roof and pull her shingles off, so we tore the walls out and then pulled the support beams down and dropped the floor on the ground, which was great. We only had a couple inches to spare by the fence, and that was cool. But I realized when I bid this price for the job, which was a good price and it was a good job, all I had was a tiny little truck. I didn't even own a utility trailer yet. I had to borrow a utility trailer in order to get this job done. And I did it because if I hadn't of, it would have been like 30 some trips to the dump. As it was still, I think it was like 12 or 13 trips to the dump. And it was so much work, but you know what? I took it on knowing I would figure out a way. It's like a lot of the projects. You start the project, you start the business because you're going to find a way to fix it, or you're going to find a solution as you go along. But you have to have just enough faith in yourself to go ahead and do it, or have a wife who's like, yeah, you can do it, honey. Go do it. Go do it. Here's another one. I don't think I've ever told this story. Again, way back. So these were all pre-starting the business story. These were when it was just a side hustle trying to make a little cash. I built Becky this cute little hall bench for, it might have been her 10th wedding anniversary. I can't remember at the time. And I loved it. And she's like, hey, you should advertise. So I put it online, and this lady gave me the dimensions of what was like this entire wardrobe thing that she wanted for an entire wall in her entranceway. And I thought, oh, this would be great. I made it and I was really happy with it. And I got it all wrapped up. I put shrink wrap all around it. It was ready to go. And she called and she said, you made that in multiple pieces, right? And I was like, well, no, you give me the dimensions. And I made it taller, wider, and longer than could go through any door in any home without thinking about it. I ended up having to cut the sections, cut it into pieces, and make it so it was reassemblable. I mean, the hours I put into that job, guys, and it was an absolute cluster from start to finish. And I was super happy with the project when it was done. But to do something so stupid as to make this, I don't even know what you want to call it. It was like a hallway closet system that was too big to fit through any average house door. What was I thinking? But you know what? I fixed it and I kept going. We tried some services along the way where stuff that, hey, Backwoods Butcher, good to see you. We tried a bunch of services that were absolutely didn't work. And a lot of them were one customer because he was an old dude who didn't want to do anything and he would just hire us to do things. But we did meal prep, laundry service, vehicle cleaning, house sitting. I even tried a flash sale one time. I remember this. This was probably, I was so excited. I did up posters. I did up Facebook advertising. I might have even done a paid Facebook ad for this one, but I can't remember. And it was I will mow any lawn in the town for $30. $30. I got one bite on that entire. I was like, this is going to be the thing that's going to put me over the top. I'm going to get all kinds of customers from it. I got one dude who signed up for the $30 lawn mowing, and he called me the day before and canceled because he didn't have the money. So there you go. Sometimes you will put your heart and your soul into advertising something, into something you think is going to work perfectly, and it doesn't. But you know what? It's okay. Because if we'd have quit after every time we tried something that didn't work, well, we wouldn't have got very far, would we? Wasted my money on a bunch of shit too. I bought a quad or a four-wheeler that I used for about one winter. We actually financed it originally, which was a horrible decision. Anyway, I just never used it. I hated it. I hate it being on in the cold. It beat and tore me to pieces. I discovered real quick that I could do a better, faster job with a walk-behind snowblower than I could ever do with a four-wheeler. But you know what? You live and you learn. I went one night, Becky messaged me. She said, "Hey, honey, you need to head to Castor. I found you a trailer." And you know what? I wouldn't call this a mistake, but it was starting with something. I went down and I bought an old frame of a trailer, and I think it was maybe $100 at the time. And I stripped it right down to the metal, fixed it all up, put a lot of sweat equity into it, and made myself this kind of, I don't know, cheesy little wooden homemade trailer. It was my very first utility trailer I ever had. And if I can, I'll pull you up some pictures one of these days and show you, because you know what? It worked. It totally wasn't legal because it didn't have a plate, or, I mean, I put a plate on it, but you know, I hope the statute of limitations is gone by. But you know what? I made it work. I stripped it down. I rebuilt it with wood. I put lights on it. I put a plate that I had on it. It just didn't have a VIN number or registration or anything, but here you go. One time I did a job for a guy. It was a massive yard cleanup, and he had an old stock trailer in the back of his parking pad. And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" And he goes, "Well, do you want to trade?" And sure. Before I even realized, I thought I was going to tear that all apart, make it into a beautiful enclosed trailer. I bought that. Probably 3 weeks later, it's sitting there. I'm looking at him like, I ain't doing this. That is too big of a piece of shit. I sold it for almost nothing. I made a little money off it, not as much as I would have if I'd got paid for the job. But again, it was, yeah, you try. There's so many things I did over the years in the business that didn't work the way I wanted it to. Backwoods Butcher says, "I have a post hole digger that broke 4 holes in, sitting in the barn. Nicole still brings it up." Oh, brother, that is exactly what Becky and I would do too. There are so many things that I bought that weren't worth the money, but that you have to try. You have to try. I was thinking back. Here's another one. I may have told you about this one before, but I had the very first gas-powered backpack blower I had was so underpowered. It was like 300 CFM. The one that I just sold with my business was well over 1,000. And the battery one I just bought is just over 800. Anyway, it doesn't matter. When I first started doing gutters, I thought, you know what would be great? Not having to go up on a ladder. So I seen this really cool attachment that fit on your backpack blower like a snorkel. And it went up and it had a candy cane on the top, and it was supposed to blow all the junk out of the gutters so that you never, ever had to worry about getting up on a ladder. Well, you know what it did? All it did was make the most god-awful mess you will ever see. It blew water, mud, dirt, sand, gravel, and leaves. And yes, I did say gravel. There was one house that I dealt with that birds filled the gutters with gravel. Anyway, it just blew everything everywhere. It was the biggest piece of shit. I sold it like 3 days after I bought it because it was an absolute waste of money. But you know what? I didn't give up doing gutters. I just kept going up a ladder with a little 2.5 gallon bucket, my gloves when I'd remember to wear them, and I would make it work. Tow behind aerator. I bought an aerator and a lawn sweep from a guy one time, and they were good. You know, they could have made me a lot of money, and I didn't take it. I had to pull it with a quad. Anyway, I ended up jerry rigging where it would hook because it had a funny tongue on the front. And so I had this really, for those in the audio, I'm going to try to explain this. It was about a 45-degree in the wrong way bend on this when it connected to the back of the four-wheeler. And about halfway through, I noticed it got a little bit flopsy. I thought, what's going on? It was this nice pull behind aerator. I go back and I had completely cracked the frame so that it was just hanging on like, you know, something blowing in the wind. Ruined it after about 3 lawns. So there you go. And the other thing I talk about, sometimes it's better to hire somebody to do something or to rent something. That's the case with a tow behind aerator and a lawn sweep. Those things are so big, so cumbersome and heavy. You use them once a year, and then you got to trip over them for 364 and 3/4 days for the rest of the year. Wasn't worth it. But I learned. Chris Dixon said, I built one thinking it was a good idea. It was not. I'm guessing talking about blowing out the gutters, because they do not, it does not work at all. And Backwoods Butcher says it's upsetting people don't want to do the work part about working. Yes, I agree completely. But that's what kept me in business for all those years. Then one day I said to Becky, I'm going to start taking, I think it was Sundays off. And then I started taking Saturdays off. And what I found out was early on, I wasn't making any less money, especially just after taking one day off, because what ended up happening was you discover, I'm just filling my days up. I'm letting things, when you tell yourself you're only going to work 6 days a week, all of a sudden you figure out a way to get it done in 6 days a week. Not always the case, but something to think about. Now, the first, 4 or 5 years of the business, it was 7 days a week, anything and everything I could take. But eventually you got to figure out, where is this going to work in my schedule? Because the other idea is not to become a slave to your business. Even though you want to do it, you're passionate about it, don't become a slave to it. So make sure you work your time in and make it work for you, because you're doing it for independence and freedom, self-reliance, the whole works. The reward, guys, far outweighs the risk, though, when it comes down to it. And we're going to talk about this in a few minutes here. I'm going to talk about my zero risk outline for building a handyman business. Doesn't mean there isn't any risk, but when it comes down to it, building something from scratch, using using stuff you have on hand, offering a service to other people, the only thing you're going to lose is your time. And guess what? If you keep moving ahead and keep moving ahead, you're going to succeed. That's what you need to hear. You need to know this, that if you keep moving ahead and you keep learning from your mistakes, you don't ever start over from zero. That's what people think. They're like, well, what happens if I work on a business for 6 months and all of a sudden something bad happens? Well, you don't start over from zero. You start at the point where you're at. You just made one bad, stupid decision. So back up a little, figure out what the hell you did wrong, and then keep going forward. That's the difference. And that's why people who are persistent find success, because most people who give up within 10% of the finish line, or 10% of being successful. They just needed to persevere a little bit longer. And if that's you out there thinking, oh, I'm having a shitty day, a shitty week, a shitty month, or what's this, the opposite of the Friends theme song? Well, anyway, keep going. It's okay to pull yourself back, look at it, and try to figure things out. Backwoods Butcher said, today is the second day of rifle season, and Nicole had to work a 15-hour shift. We didn't schedule that one right, and that's okay. Chris Dixon, I love this, and I'm going to read this as forcefully as I can, but quotation marks around this, and this is the mindset. It's the poverty mindset in your head, and it says, hey, I'm going to lose everything, but you need to remember you're not going to. Chris says, and he's right, you're going to pivot, and you're going to move on, and that's what makes a successful business. That's what ends up making somebody who becomes a metal worker or doing his forge work, that ends up paying his house off, because you continue to pivot and you turn a side hustle / hobby into an income that is a significant portion of your income. Rachel Brown says the trajectory is never straight. It zigs and it zags. And you know what? Sometimes it backs up. Sometimes you got to go back a little ways, and that's okay too. But yes, it's like, I don't know, growing up, my dad always used to joke, in Nova Scotia, there's no such thing as a straight road, because there's rock and ledge and cliffs and everything. And Dad always used to say, when I was 5 years, he'd be like, they must have followed a snake through here to make this road. And he would say it like it was the funniest thing. I know, where do I get my humor from? But it's true. It reminds me of those roads, because that's what it is. You go up and you're like, oh, okay. Or you know what, even better than that? Successful business is like going through a maze. I used to go to a park. It's since been tore down, called Upper Clemens Park. And it was a theme park. And they used to have this maze. You'd go in and they could move the wooden walls around. So every night they'd move it, so it'd be a little bit different. And what you would do is you'd go through and you'd get maybe 10 yards in and you'd hit a dead end. So you'd turn around and you go back. But here's the thing. when you're working on a maze, you don't go 3/4 of the way through. You run into a wall and you're like, well, shit, I guess I'll give up. Let's go all the way back to the entrance and start over. Why the hell would you do that? You're already 3/4 of the way through. Back up, pivot, and keep going. That's the 100% the key to success in business. Taking on new skills, guys, one of the things I realized over the years, taking on new skills is always scary and intimidating. I'm probably come across as fairly confident sometimes, but deep down inside, I'm scared shitless and a little boy who thinks, no, you can't do this. But you know what? I would still do it and I would figure it out. And it was like any job that I would take on for the first time. One of the ones I remember was when somebody posted online, I cannot find anybody to rehab my front lawn. And if you're wondering what that means, what it is somebody has a water main break in the wintertime or whenever in the spring, and their front lawn's dug up. And so what ends up happening is they fix it, and then there's a big pile of dirt there for like a year while it settles. And the biggest problem in our town was that there was literally no company that would do the work. So if you could quote basically anything to an insurance company, they would pay it. Basically a license to print money. And so Becky said, honey, go after this. And so I did. And I think the first one I charged $3,000 or $3,500. I'd never done anything like it before. I'd done all the skills before, but I'd never put it all together in one thing. And this one even required building a little piece of a fence. And I was really proud of myself. But you know what? I did that one. I made some mistakes. I had to go back and reseed it a couple of times because I didn't do a good enough job. The next one I bid, I always, here's the thing. Sometimes we get blinders on, right? And I always thought, what would be really fun is to work with sod. And I used to tell Becky, she'd say, call and get a price on sod. I said, I'm not going to call because it's going to be too damn expensive. Well, I was wrong. I called and it was cheap as hell. And when you figured in the labor and the ease of application, it was actually as cheap and a way better finished product than grass seed was. And so I did it. And man, it became one of those things that we became really good at. We did 4 or 5 of them before I got out of it. And like I said, it was a license to print money. But the first time I did it, I was so scared. I remember putting the job off for like 3 weeks just simply because I thought I was going to fail. But I didn't. We did great. I go by that lawn. I go by all the lawns now that I did. And I'm really proud of them. And yeah, but Chris Dixon says people think a lawn rehab takes a few hours. It's a season-long job and it's worth every bit of $2,000 to $4,000. Yes, it is. But I'll also say that the biggest game changer for me was going with rolled up sod as opposed to grass seed. Better finished product. And as long as the customer keeps up with their end of watering it afterwards, you'll be good. I don't know about this one. I don't know if I ever shared this, but the very, very first snow job, that sounds funny, the very first snow clearing job that I ever had was for a guy named Kenny. He had a business downtown and he had a house 2 doors over, and he wanted his front walkway for the business and his back deck at his house cleared. And Becky, I think she was working, but wasn't working a lot at the time. She advertised on the internet on Facebook and found me the very first customer for snow. And I was like, I said to her, I don't think I can do this. What the hell was wrong with me? Why did I think I couldn't do it? It was literally taking a snow shovel over and pushing snow on into the road or off his back deck. And I remember going over that very first morning with that stupid little blue $3 snow shovel, scared to death I was going to fuck it up. I'm like, how? It was because it was such a foreign concept to me that somebody was willing to pay me on a recurring basis to just come back and do the snow. And that was kind of the very first. I remember being just nervously excited. And I got up way early to go do it. And then it ended up snowing a little bit later on. I had to go back and do it again, but it's okay. You're going to remember, embrace that nervousness, embrace those very first memories, because once it gets to a certain size, a certain, scope of business, it's just not quite the same. So embrace those early times because you'll have time to remember them. Eventually every job just kind of melds into the others, but you'll remember a few. So put together this list. Now you can take it for just about any business that you want, and it's cool, but I called it the zero risk handyman path. Now, here's the thing. There's multiple ways to do it. And for many years, I always said, start a business, start it as a side hustle, build it up to when it's making you as much money as you need from your day-to-day business or from your day-to-day job, and then walk away. It's So this is a bit structured on that, but I will also say that most people who get really successful in business do it because they have no other option. They burnt the bridges, they blew up the boats, whatever it happens to be, they can't go back. And so there is something to be said about desperation, whether it's artificial or actual desperation that leads to motivation. But anyway, so here's what we're going to talk about real quick as we go through this list. But the very first thing, if you're going to build a business, and really it's any business, but we're going to talk about service-based businesses or handyman businesses, 10 hours a week. You need to commit yourself to 10 hours a week. You got to find 10 hours, and I don't care where it is. It could be, giving up a hobby. It could be getting up an hour early, going to bed an hour later. It could be taking one of your 2 weekend days off. But here's the thing, it sucks. So if you want to do this, you've got to give up something else you're enjoying, or you got to give up some of your leisure time. So that part's not easy. But once you do it, it's kind of like, going on a treadmill or anything else. Once you get in the groove after doing it for 2 or 3 weeks or a month or 2 months, eventually it becomes what you do. But the very first thing you need to do if you want to start a business is you've got to look at your schedule and say, these are my non-negotiable hours. I'm going to work on my business on these 10 hours a week. And 10 hours seems to be a good amount. It's enough that you can build something great, but it's not too much that it takes over your entire life before it's coming to fruition, before it's starting to bring money in for you. So first off, start with 10 hours a week. You got to find 10 hours, and talk to your wife about it if you need to figure out a way to do it. But 10 hours is a really good place to start. Now, the next thing I would say is start a service-based business, because so many people come to me and they're like, hey, I want to be a reseller for, I don't know, freeze dryers or European washing machines. And you'll be like, okay, well, what's the margin on them? Well, I'll make 3%, but the washing machines cost $10,000. Anyway, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but really what I'm getting down to is there's a reason that restaurants and brick and mortar businesses tend to not succeed really. And I would actually venture to say that, they always say that the vast majority of entrepreneurial ventures fail in the first couple of years. And I would say that's really heavily skewed toward restaurants and brick and mortar stores that require you to stock a lot of inventory, because you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage if you're trying to build a business and you're trying to invest a whole bunch of money up front. Why not build a business that's going to bring money in without spending any money? And I sound like a multi-level marketing guy here, but this is what a service-based business is. Your time's worth something. It's actually worth a lot more probably than your boss is paying you for. So if you have a sewing machine, or you know how to do alterations, why don't you do alterations for people? Because you probably already have a sewing machine and you already have the skills to do it. So it costs you literally zero. You can advertise, hang up posters, or, post in a couple of next door groups, that sort of thing, to just get started. It costs you nothing, but it just takes jumping off that cliff and getting started. But that's why I'm such a big fan of service-based businesses, because there's really almost no upfront cost. I didn't even get a business license. I know, right? I remember getting pulled over by the code enforcement guy a couple of years after I was into business, because I finally put my logo on the side of the truck. And when I had on the side of my truck, all of a sudden I attracted attention. But I didn't get insurance early on. A lot of things I didn't do. I did them as I went along. But start with a service-based business and do what you're comfortable with, and then if you want to build into something else, then branch into that. But I'm telling you, if you start something in the service-based end of it, you'll get addicted to it, because you realize you're bringing money in and you're not sending a lot of money out, and it's awesome. Backwoods Butcher says, I'm pretty sure we're actually going to turn a profit this year. Way to go, brother. I love hearing that. And Dixon says, don't be afraid of selling handmade goods. You still get to bill your time and talent. Yes. And you're typically taking low cost of entry. So you're buying raw goods, whatever, whether it's leather or wood or whatever, and you're turning them into a huge markup. You're putting your time and talent into the big markup that you're going to make. And there's a lot more return on that. Yes, I love that. Absolutely. Figure out a way to make it work. All right. So 10 hours a week, service-based business. Those are two things that are going to set you up for success early on. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. You're still going to have days where you might cry in the bathroom, but it's okay. Next, get 1% better every day. And this is true. And this is in everything, because I talk about it and people are like, oh, get better at mowing lawns, whatever. Yeah. But that could mean getting a better tool. It could mean figuring out stupid little things like I would mow a lawn a certain way 3 or 4 times in a row, and then I would try to do it in a slightly more efficient manner. And I would do this over and over again until I figured I'm doing the least amount of steps possible. And when it was done, you could get a hell of a lot of work done in a shorter amount of time. Get 1% better at new skills, at offering new services for people. But here's one people don't think about is advertising. And how do you get 10% or 1% better at advertising? Well, you try something, and if it works, you try it again. You tweak this, you tweak that. You're always trying a little bit more to see what works in your local community. But if you commit 10 hours a week, do a service-based business, and commit to getting 1% better every single week, it's a good start. Here's the next one. And this is one that I did struggle with at times. You're going to laugh. You'll know it. You've heard Jack Spirko say it. But I was pretty damn good for the first few years until the business got really, really busy. Show up, show up, show up, show up. Show up when you say you're going to. Show up before you say you're going to. If you're not going to make it, make sure you have a legitimate reason, and make sure you call your customer the night before. But if you can do that, that puts you ahead of 80% of everybody else on the market right now. It's so frustrating, and sometimes you don't think about it as the guy who's doing the work, but we're trying to get a fence installed at the daycare, the new daycare. And the one guy said, yep, we'll meet you there. I said, we're driving, or Becky said, we're driving a solid hour from out of town to meet you. Yep, no problem. And we show up. He's like, I'm running a little late. And for the next 2 hours, he dicked us along. And finally said, yeah, just send me pictures. I'm not going to show up. And we asked him, like, are you even interested? And he's like, well, I'd love to, but I don't really have the time. So why did you even say, I'll meet you there to begin with? If you're going to do it, if you say you're going to do it, just do it. Simple as that. Chris Dixon says, learn time management so you can show up. Exactly. That's a big one. And that was a struggle for me for a long time, but show up, and you will be worth it. It will be worth it to you. Early on, and this is going to be weird, and some people might not always agree with it, but take on any and all jobs. And this is the reason for that. Early on, and then the next thing Backwood says is learn to say no to people. Yep, that comes a little bit later on, but early on in the business, try everything, because you never know. You might really like doing something that you think you're going to hate. If you try it once and you hate it, well, don't do it again. But you might try it and realize, shit, this is making me a lot of money. All right, let's keep going. But try everything and anything once. I call it the spaghetti method. Whatever it is, you throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Those little pieces of spaghetti that stick to the wall, those are the ones you look at. Why is that? Why did that work? Okay, let's do it again. Let's keep making more money, more and more and more. Backwood says, learn to say no. It's still a struggle for him. And Dixon says, learn to say not right now to people. Yes. Learn to say to some people, and you know what? Here's something that worked really well for me. If I figured it would take me a week to get there, I would tell people 3 weeks. And the reason for that, and if they were okay with 3 weeks, then they were sure as hell going to be okay if I showed up in a week. But if I told them a week and it took me 2 weeks to show up, all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. So I would always undercommit and over deliver. That was my plan, was to say it would take me 3 weeks to get there and I'd be there in a week and a half, because it gave me a little bit of a mental buffer to make it work. But sometimes it still didn't work. But yes, Chris Dixon says, learn to say not right now. And here's the other thing, no matter how rewarding financially a job might be, if you can't make it work, don't say yes, because it's just going to frig you up in the long run. Another one here. So if you're into a service-based business, use a job to buy tools. Now, that doesn't mean, finance the next job with the next job with the next job like some contractors do. But if you're looking at doing a big job and you're like, hey, I really need a new, bandsaw, for instance, look at that job, build the cost into that, and then buy the tool and then pay it back with the money you bring in from it. Something like that. But I did that a lot. I would be like, okay, I'd need to, and quite often because I wanted to review it, I would, put the cart before the horse, but use the money from a job to upgrade, especially the first couple of years. You're not going to make a lot of money from a business in the first couple of years because you're going to be reinvesting into new and better stuff that's going to bring you those efficiencies. It's going to allow you to get 1% better all the time. But when it comes down to it, eventually you're going to kind of level out. And then you're going to be at the point, okay, I have the gear I need. And then you're just on replacement. Okay, I broke a snowblower. I got to buy one. But I don't have to buy 4 snowblowers this year. I only have to buy 1. I've talked about this before, but you are worth more than you think you're worth. I don't think once in all the years, what do I say? Like, I'm doing it for decades. In all the time we've been in the Telegram group, I don't think there's been once where somebody said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about charging. And we came back and said, whoa, you're not worth that much. Hold back. Nope, don't do it. Because as a human, we almost always undervalue our time. So again, be a little bit uncomfortable with pricing a job. I always used to use the idea that if I got half the jobs, I was happy with it. And then as I got busier and busier, it was if I got a quarter of the jobs, I was happy with it. But I use the old analogy. You've heard it 100 times. If you bid 2 jobs at $100 and get them both, you make $200. If you bid 2 jobs at $200 and get one, you made $200, but for half the work. Remember that. Find the jobs that pay you the most, that you have to work the least, and you'll be the happiest. And keep repeating that. And so it becomes kind of like a pyramid till eventually you're like, you know what? The only thing I want to do is property management. Let's get rid of the rest, because property management, for the most part, pays the best and requires the least amount of work. That's kind of the end of a business, if that's where you want to end up being. Dixon says, under promise, over deliver mentality. Dark Sky says, that's our issue right now. Learning to estimate the time a job will take. It always seems to take longer than we think it should. Okay, you're in a good position right now. And this is, because you're learning and you're going to screw it up. Early on, you're going to take on jobs. You're going to think, hey, that's going to be a 5-hour job. And it turns out to be a 15-hour job. And you're going to stick with your price, because that's what we do. We give them a price and we stick with it. But you're going to remember it, because you're saying right here, see what you're saying? You're saying it always seems to take longer than we think it should. Well, you know what the lesson from that is? And you'll know it. You're not building enough labor into your quotes. So just start doubling your labor, or 50% add on of your labor. Eventually you'll find the sweet spot. And the more you do it, you will go to a job and you'll know. I used to go to a gutter cleaning job, and I'd tell Mackenzie, I'd be like, this is going to be 1 hour and 15 minutes. And within 5 minutes, either way, we'd be done. So eventually, once you know how long it takes you to do certain things, you'll get more comfortable with it. But build more labor into your quotes, because you don't want to come away thinking, oh, I didn't make enough money ever. So Dark Sky Homestead, you're doing it right. You're recognizing that you're not putting enough labor into your quotes. So what do? Bump it up from there. Chris Dixon says, it's funny how reputation will precede you. I've overbid jobs a ridiculous amount because I really didn't want it and ended up getting it. Yep. That's happened to me too. I joke, I call it the F off price. It's like, I really don't want the time. Well, those are the ones when you just throw it a massively high price and they come back to you real quick. Dixon says, in a service business, the money is in the labor sold, not the parts or products sold. That's right. You can make 10%. I always tell people, if you're going to sell the materials, you can make 10% as well. But honestly, most times I would just say, let the customer go get the materials if you want, because it's one less thing for you to have to carry, because that's a big upfront investment to end up carrying to make 10% on. So yes, make your money in your labor, and make a lot of money on your labor. The next one, and this took me about a year to get, but I see this in business books all the time now, but price by the job, not by the hour, because you will make a much higher hourly rate if you can do it. Because again, people want to know what they're going to pay before you start, number one. They also don't, if you want to have a good time, don't tell people you're going to bill them by the hour, because if you do, they're going to be watching you every minute. Every time you stop to scratch your butt, they're going to be like, I'm going to write that down, because they should have been working. And then you go back to them and they're like, oh yeah, guess what? You didn't work for 17 minutes earlier when you took a phone call. You need to take that off the bill. You eliminate all of that. That's the same reason I went to a monthly subscription thing for snow, as opposed to a by time thing, because it was always equivalent. Customers be like, well, why did you come and do the snow this time? It was only 1/4 of an inch. And I'd be like, because if I don't, it's going to be 3 times as hard to get it next time. And they're like, I don't care. You're charging me by the time. So as soon as I started charging by the month, Nobody complained about that anymore. The only time they complained is if I didn't show up. But then they knew the base level of service. I knew the base level of service. And I also knew exactly what I was going to make every single month. Backwoods Butcher said, I've started adding minimum prices. Doesn't matter if it weighs 70 pounds or 130 pounds. It's the same amount of work of dirty equipment. Great. Yes. Don't sell yourself short, brother. And then I just read Chris Dixon's comment. Don't sell yourself short. You have a skill that many don't. You have a skill that most don't, brother. So keep it up. Here's one that it took us a while to learn, and we're just really starting to learn it now. Pay your taxes and hire somebody who can handle that for you, because Becky did it for many years and she's great at it, but eventually you get to a point in the business where you need to have an expert to take care of that stuff for you. So do it. Don't ignore it either. Set money aside to pay your taxes, because you don't want to end up with a great big lump sum of money being owed a year or two down the road. It's also easier to lower your price than it is to raise it. Now, that doesn't mean lower your price, but what it does mean is if you get known for being a cheap person around town and having the cheapest price, and all of a sudden you start trying to put that price up, people are going to balk at it. Like, well, I don't think you're worth that much. But if you've been bidding a lot of prices and they're a little high, you can always bring it down a little bit. To me, that suited me really, really well. Fire customers, guys. This is a tough one, but if you have back up a little bit. When you first start a business, again, you're looking to build, you're casting a wide net, you're bringing in all kinds of fish. And then the first fish you pull in it's a baby fish. So you want to throw that back because, well, you're not going to make much money from a baby fish. And then this one over here, this is a cranky old senior citizen who is never happy with anything you ever do. And when you first start, you might be willing to take that on for a bit because you're really trying to build your business. But eventually, remember, you're the boss. Get rid of them. We only fired a couple of customers over the years, but every time I fired a customer, and the only time I fired an employee, I felt way better for it. I was nervous. I was sick to my stomach leading up to it every time. And then when I did it, I was like, oh, yes. And Chris Dixon says, I'll bend over backwards for everyone, but I'll bend over forwards for no one. That's true. But yes, have a short leash for customers, because especially once you start getting a good Rolodex of customers, again, what is this, 1983? But when you have a good database of customers, keep a short leash for the shitty ones, because life's too short to deal with shitty customers. That's why you become your own boss, so you don't have to deal with 100 shitty customers. Now, if it's your fault, own it, embrace it, move on from it. But if it's them, get rid of them, because they would just as quickly get rid of you if they could. Work for people that want you to do the job. Don't work for people that have to get you to do the job. Now, what's the difference there? And again, I'm going to tell you this, and it doesn't mean don't work for senior citizens. But when I first started, I thought, you know what? Who needs to have people do work for them? And I thought, oh, senior citizens. And yes, they do. And I'm not saying don't work for seniors. You're more than welcome to do it. But they tend to have a lot of free time. They tend to have a very limited income, and they tend to be rather particular. So I realized really quick that they didn't want you to do it. They had to get you to do it because they used to do it themselves. And that's okay if you find the right customer, but a lot of them became very difficult. So find the people that want you to do the work. Find the people that you're really doing them a favor. Again, I always say the guys that want to be away on vacation, or the guys that are too busy working to be able to do this kind of stuff, they're the ones that are making the money, and they're willing to pay you what you're worth. That doesn't mean don't work for some seniors. It just means be particular about it. But it's a hell of a lot better to work for people who want you to do it as opposed to people who have to get you to do it. There's a big difference. And remember that. Look for the customers that want to get you to do it. Backwoods says, keep friendships as friendships and business relationships as business relationships. When the lines start to cross, things go Western. Yes, they do. And then throw in family into that as well. And then all of a sudden, holy shit, you've got yourself a great old, spaghetti Western at that point. It's not good. But yeah, so again, yep, business, even for family, if the family wants you to do work for them, treat it like it's a business. If you want to give them a little bit of a break on the price, fine, but I'd recommend not doing it because, anyway. Yes, so that's right. Friends, family, business. Keep them all separate if you can help it. So when it comes down to it, here's the thing, and this is what I wrote in big capital letters. Repeat until you've built it to the point that you are happy. So what does that mean? That means to follow all those steps. You know, it means to find 10 hours a week, start a service-based business, get 1% better every day, show up, show up, show up, take any and all jobs at first, use jobs to buy new tools. Remember, you're worth more than you think. Price the job, buy the job, not by the hour. Hire somebody to do your taxes. Fire customers and work for people who want you to work for them. And what do? You repeat that until you've built the business where you want it to be. Some weeks are going to be great. Some weeks are going to be bangers where you make the most money you've ever made. And other weeks you're going to be like, why did I do this? But the one thing you're not going to do, you're not going to give up. You're going to keep doing, you're going to rinse, you're going to repeat. Now, here's the thing. Have a goal in mind. When you start, your goal is going to be completely too small, too big, whatever it is. You know, at one time I had a goal in my head to make a handyman business chain where I would offer it all across the country. Glad I didn't do that because I realized I don't like employees. So as you go along, have an idea of what your definition of happiness is, what your definition of self-reliance is, what your definition of independence is, and build your business to that point. You don't have to. The cool thing about building a business like that is you're not beholden to what massive business conglomerations have to be, where they always have to show financial improvement and income increasing. Because once you get to a certain level, if you have a business making the amount of money you want to make, working the amount of hours you want to work, live there, guys. Embrace it. Be happy. You don't have to grow it any more than that. So if you get to that point, love it. Embrace it. Know when you're there. Don't keep going. But the part that's the hardest is that repeat until. And people say, well, how do you get successful in business? Well, those two words, repeat until. Repeat until. I've been quoting the Arnold Schwarzenegger book like crazy lately, but that book was so good. And he says, embrace the reps. And repeat until is another way of saying that. Continue to do the right thing every day until you're at the point where you want to be. It might take you a month. It probably won't, though. It'll probably take more like 4 or 5 years to get there. So don't start something thinking, well, I'm going to get rich tomorrow, because anything worth building is worth taking a long time to do it. And that's okay. You know, could you go outside and pick up a winning lottery ticket? Yep, you could. But more than likely, the best way to do it is to build something great and turn it into the life you want to live, and change it as you go and embrace the change. But remember those two words, repeat until. Repeat until you're successful. Repeat until you screw up, back up a little, fix it, and keep going. And that's all. That's it, guys. What do they say? It's simple, but it ain't easy. It's the most simple thing in the world. You have 4 or 5 things to do. You do them right. You do them well. But the problem is that nobody wants to repeat until. They want to just do it, and they want to be successful. They want to have the fully built business without the 6 or 7 years of reps behind it. So embrace the reps, guys. Repeat it until you're successful. What is it? It's simple, but it ain't easy. Like Chris Dixon says, lather, rinse, repeat. It means a lot to me. Yes, it's a flippant saying that we throw around a lot, but it is true, and I use it all the time too, because that's what it comes down to. Whether it's building a successful YouTube channel, well, guess what? It's 3 times a week live stream, coming down here doing it because I love it. Embrace it. Put a smile on your face. Get up, get doing it. Get out at 5:30 in the morning every day it snows and clear the snow. Whatever it happens to be, lather, rinse, repeat, or repeat until, repeat until, repeat until. Wake up and go again. Wake up and go again. Embrace the grind, and eventually you'll be there. And all of a sudden people will say, wow, that just blew up overnight. And you'll just want to say, fuck off, because they don't see the getting up and doing it every single day. Get your ass out there, guys. Do great things. Build great things. If you're sitting there right now, and this will be to you, whoever it is. We got a lot of people who are building businesses who are successful entrepreneurs in here tonight, and we all need to hear it. I need to hear it about what I do. But here's what it comes down to. If you're one of them on the fence right now and you're thinking, I don't know if I can do this. Well, you can. It's simple, but it ain't easy. Just get up every day and do it. Work those 10 hours that you committed to that business as the best, hardest, balls to the wall 10 hours a week you can do, and you'll be successful. I can't guarantee when, but you will be. Simple as that. That's what it is. The people who fail in business are the people that quit. The people who fail in business are the people that give up. And you're not going to give up. You won't, because you want that life. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you. Appreciate the hell out of you. Thanks for coming in here on a Thursday night. Next episode will be Sunday night. Yesterday took Friday night's episode. We're going to kick ass and take names, getting the next daycare up and running this weekend. I appreciate you guys like crazy. Thanks for sticking with me with the up and down time changes for a little while. Keep it up. As always, guys, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great friggin' week. Papa Tim.